Chapter 1. The line that can't be unheard. Mike Harris folded towels with mechanical precision, corners aligned, seams tucked just the way he preferred. Not because anyone asked him to. Not because Claire cared whether bath towels formed uniform rectangles. He did it because the repetition quieted his mind. The garage smelled faintly of detergent and fresh spring air drifting in from the open side door. Sunday sunlight slanted across the concrete floor, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily, oblivious to schedules or vows or consequences. Mike envied them a little. Laundry was one of those chores that required just enough attention to keep spiraling thoughts at bay. The deliberate movements let him think only when he wanted to. He paused, holding one of Claire's sweaters, navy blue, soft from too many washes. His mind wandered, movies tonight, maybe Italian afterward. She'd mentioned craving pasta earlier. He made a mental note, not to impress her, just because remembering mattered. That's when he heard them. Claire's laugh came first, drifting in from the backyard. Warm, familiar, the laugh she used when she felt safe. Her friend's voice followed, sharper, louder. Wine loosened. Last night was fun, the friend said. I forgot how good it feels to actually get out. Mike's hands continued moving, folding, stacking. Claire replied, casual. It was. I needed it. Then came the sentence that stopped him cold. John wants to know when you're coming out again. The towel slipped from Mike's hands. He froze, palms resting on the dryer, every muscle locked. The world sharpened instantly, his hearing, his focus, his breath. The magnifying glass clicked into place without his permission. Pause. Claire laughed, light and dismissive. I told you, it was just one dance. Mike waited. I know, her friend said, her voice lower now, closer. But it could be more. That was the line. Not the dance. Not the name. That sentence. Mike's mind categorized it instantly, like labeling a file he wished he could discard. Active interference. Intentional disruption. Not accidental. He counted to 3, then 5. He waited to hear Claire correct her. She didn't. Instead, another laugh. Softer this time. You're being silly. Not don't say that. Not I'm married. Not stop. Just smoothing it over. The enemy wasn't outside the gates. They were inside the keep, smiling, pouring wine. Mike picked up the fallen towel and folded it carefully. He set it on top of the stack and exhaled once, slow and controlled. When he opened the door to the backyard, conversation snapped off mid-breath. Both women looked up. Claire smiled immediately, genuine, unguarded. That almost made it worse. Her friend's face flickered, annoyance before politeness. A scowl masked into a social smile so fast it would have been impressive if it weren't so familiar. Hey, Claire said. Want a glass of wine? Mike didn't answer. He looked at Claire, then at the bottle, then back at her friend. I heard your conversation, he said. Claire's smile faded. You what? Who's John? Silence landed heavily between them. Claire's eyes widened. He's a guy I danced with. Once. Nothing happened. Mike nodded slowly. Okay. Then why is your best friend sitting in my backyard, trying to set you up with a man you only danced with once? Her friend scoffed. That is not. Mike held up a hand without looking at her. This isn't your house. That was your last contribution to this conversation. Claire's breath hitched. Mike, that's not what happened. Save it, he said calmly. Too calmly. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm explaining something you're choosing not to see. He rested his palms on the table, leaning forward just enough to meet her eyes. You invited someone into our life who is actively working against our marriage. And every time she does, you defend her instead of us. I'm not. I love you, he said quietly. But I don't trust you right now. Claire stared at him, her mouth opening, then closing. If you haven't cheated, he continued. At this rate, it won't be long. I'm not leaving you, but I'm not pretending we're on the same team. He slid his wedding ring off his finger and set it gently on the table. The soft clink sounded impossibly loud. If you're going to betray me, he said, voice steady, it won't be while I'm wearing the ring you put on my finger when you promised to forsake all others. He turned and walked inside. Behind him, Claire's voice cracked. Her friend said nothing. Mike didn't slam doors. He moved with quiet efficiency, gathering what he needed, placing it in the guest room. He closed the door just as Claire knocked. Please, she said. What do you want from me? He opened the door just long enough to answer. The same thing you promised me on our wedding day. Then he closed it. On the other side, Claire sank to the hallway floor, shaking, realizing too late that smoothing things over wasn't kindness. It was avoidance, and it might cost her everything. Chapter 2. The silence between walls. The house did not sound the same once doors were closed. Mike noticed it immediately. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. The tick of the hallway clock landed harder than usual. Even the floorboards seemed to hesitate under his feet, as if they weren't sure they wanted to cooperate anymore. He lay on the guest bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades blur into a single ring. He hadn't turned the light off. There was no reason to. Sleep wasn't going to happen just because the room was darker. On the other side of the wall, Claire didn't move. That was the part that bothered him. Not the silence itself. He understood silence. He relied on it. What unsettled him was the quality of it. It wasn't wounded. It wasn't angry. Felt frozen. Like someone standing still because they weren't sure which direction would make things worse. Mike rolled onto his side and stared at the closed door. He hadn't planned any of it. Not the ring. Not the words. Those just came out fully formed, like they'd been waiting in line politely for years. He flexed his left hand, bare where the gold band used to sit. The ghost of its weight lingered, a phantom pressure he couldn't quite shake. At some point, he got up. He brushed his teeth, folded his clothes again, unnecessarily, straightened the already straightened stack on the chair. He caught himself aligning the edge of the comforter with the mattress seam and forced his hands away. Not now, he told himself. Don't spiral. The next morning, they passed each other in the kitchen like polite strangers sharing a space temporarily. Claire was already dressed for work, standing at the counter gripping a mug she hadn't touched. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her eyes rimmed red. She looked smaller somehow. Morning, she said, voice careful. Morning, Mike replied, neutral. They stood there, both waiting for the other to say something that would change the trajectory of the day. Nothing came. Mike took a travel mug from the cabinet, poured coffee, and replaced the creamer exactly where he'd lifted it from. Muscle memory carried him out the door. Claire didn't follow. At work, he functioned. He always did. Spreadsheets behaved exactly the way they were supposed to. Emails followed logic. His calendar made sense. There were rules here, expectations. If you responded appropriately, outcomes followed. No one smoothed over betrayal with a laugh in conference rooms. During lunch, a coworker leaned over the cubicle wall. You okay, man? You look shinier. Mike blinked. Shinier? Like you've been waxed down to your thoughts. Mike exhaled through his nose. Did you need something, Mark? Mark waved him off. Never mind. Just don't forget the department thing tomorrow. Plus one's welcome. Mike nodded automatically, then paused. Plus ones. Yeah. Mark shrugged. Spouses, girlfriends, emotional support reptiles. Whatever. Right, Mike said. That afternoon, Claire sat in her car in her parents' driveway, hands locked around the steering wheel long after the engine stopped. She hadn't planned to drive there. Her body had simply turned when her brain stopped arguing. Her mother opened the door before Claire knocked, concern immediate. Honey. The word broke something loose. Claire sat at the kitchen table while her mother poured tea and her father pretended to read the paper without actually turning a page. She told them everything. The dancing, the friend, the laugh, the ring. When she finished, the kitchen felt heavier. Her father spoke first. Why didn't you shut it down? Claire flinched. I didn't think it was that serious. Her mother didn't rescue her. Claire. I hate confrontation, Claire whispered. You know that. I didn't want it to become a thing. Her father folded the paper. It became a thing anyway. Her mother sighed, sitting across from her. Your husband didn't accuse you of cheating. Do you know how rare that is in situations like this? Claire nodded miserably. He told you he doesn't trust you. Her mother continued gently. That means he still believes there's something worth trusting. Claire's throat tightened. What if I already ruined it? Then you stop pretending this is about comfort, her father said, and start deciding what side you're on. That night, Mike came home later than usual. Claire was on the couch, laptop closed, phone untouched beside her. She stood when he entered, then stopped herself, hands curling at her sides. I talked to my parents, she said. Mike nodded. Okay. They think I messed up. Pause. So do I, she added. Mike set down his keys. He didn't sit. He didn't approach. He studied her like a variable that no longer followed the expected formula. I didn't realize how much I'd been prioritizing peace over partnership, Claire said carefully. I've already told her not to come over anymore. And This isn't a checklist, Mike said quietly. Claire swallowed. I know. I don't want you to think I'm not doing anything. I see you doing something, Mike replied. I don't know if it's the right thing yet. Claire nodded. That's fair. They stood there, unscripted and unsure. I'm not asking you to come back to the bedroom, she said. I needed you to know I'm not ignoring this. Mike hesitated, then said, thank you. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't nothing. Upstairs, the ring sat on the dresser where Mike had left it, catching the light just enough to be noticed, waiting to find out whether silence was temporary or permanent. Chapter 3. Advice that doesn't comfort. Mike had not realized how much his wedding ring had managed his social interactions until he stopped wearing it. It was a strange thing to learn 3 days later in the break room while waiting for the microwave to finish screaming at someone else's leftovers. New haircut, Angela from accounting asked. Mike looked up. No. Different posture? No. She frowned, studying him openly. Something's changed. Mike took his coffee and escaped back to his desk before she could complete the investigation. At home, Claire noticed the opposite. The ring lay exactly where it had been placed, aligned parallel to the dresser edge, catching the same square of afternoon light each day. Mike hadn't moved it, hadn't touched it. The space around it was noticeably empty, as though it existed in its own exclusion zone. They spoke technically. Do we need milk? I picked some up. Meeting ran late. Okay. The words neither healed nor harmed. They simply existed like traffic signals obeyed by habit. On Thursday evening, Claire tested a boundary. I'm going for a walk, she said, slipping on her shoes. Mike nodded. Back before dark? She smiled faintly. Yes. When she came back, there was soup on the stove, her favorite, slightly overpeppered because Mike always underestimated how spicy food should be to count. She said thank you. He said you're welcome. Neither mentioned the guest room door. That same night, Claire scrolled through her phone, thumb hovering over her best friend's contact. She closed the app instead and opened a blank email. I need to talk. She didn't send it. At work the next day, Mike attended the department social. He stood at a standing table with a paper plate and found himself answering the same question repeatedly. No, my wife couldn't make it. Oh, everything okay? He learned quickly how to deflect. Yes, she's busy. Schedule conflict. Each answer sounded thinner than the last. As the night wound down, a woman he barely knew smiled at him too long. You seem steady, she said. Mike blinked. I am married. Her smile faltered. Oh, sorry. He glanced at his hand and felt something tighten behind his ribs. Still married, he corrected. She nodded, embarrassed. Right, of course. The conversation ended. The realization didn't. That weekend, Claire sat again at her parents' kitchen table. Her mother listened. Her father watched Claire's hands. He's not punishing you, her mother said carefully. He's protecting himself. I know, Claire whispered. And you? Her father asked. What are you protecting? Claire stared at the mug between her palms. I'm afraid I waited too long to make a choice. Then stop waiting, he replied. That night, back home, Mike stood in the doorway to the guest room and watched Claire move around the bedroom, folding laundry, pausing as if expecting him to say something. He almost did. Instead, he closed the door gently and lay awake, wondering when silence stopped being space and started being distance. Chapter 4. The Friend Problem. Fully exposed, Claire had always believed conflict came in loud, dramatic shapes. Raised voices, slammed doors, declarations that couldn't be taken back. She was learning, slowly and painfully, that the most dangerous kind came wrapped in familiarity. She sat in her car outside a cafe she and her best friend had frequented for years, hands resting uselessly in her lap. The place smelled faintly of roasted coffee and toasted bread, memories clinging to the walls like condensation. This was neutral ground, public enough to prevent theatrics, familiar enough that the meeting couldn't be brushed off as hostile. Her phone buzzed. Running 5 minutes late, the text read, Traffic. Claire stared at the screen, feeling an unexpected calm settle over her chest. 5 days ago, she would have replied with reassurance and a joke. Now she simply typed back, okay. When her friend finally walked in, she smiled brightly and waved as if this were any other Saturday ritual. She ordered her usual without asking Claire what she wanted, then slid into the chair with practiced confidence. You've been weirdly quiet, her friend said, stirring sugar into her cup. Everything okay at home? Claire folded her hands on the table. No. The word landed cleanly. No cushioning. Her friend blinked. Oh, well, marriage stuff, right? That happens. No, Claire said. This is different. Her friend leaned back, arms crossing. What's that supposed to mean? It means I heard what you said in my backyard, Claire replied evenly. About John. A flash of annoyance crossed her friend's face. Wow, so he's eavesdropping now. Claire didn't flinch. You were encouraging me to see another man. In my home. While my husband was folding our laundry. Her friend scoffed. I was joking. You weren't. You're being dramatic. Claire shook her head. I've been dramatic my whole life. This is me being honest. Her friend's tone sharpened. I don't like him, Claire. He's rigid. Judgmental. He looks at everything like it's a test. Claire inhaled slowly. He looks at everything like it matters. That's not healthy. What's not healthy? Claire said, voice steady now. Is pretending loyalty is optional. Her friend's smile turned thin. So what? Is this an ultimatum? Claire thought of Mike's quiet voice. The ring on the dresser. No, she said. It's a line. Silence stretched. You're choosing him, her friend said finally, disbelief curling the words. I'm choosing my marriage, Claire corrected. And I should have done it sooner. Her friend stood abruptly. Don't call me when you realize you made a mistake. Claire remained seated. Don't wait by the phone. I won't. The bell above the cafe door jingled sharply as her friend left. Claire didn't cry. When she got home, Mike was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with methodical precision. He glanced up as she entered. Hey, he said. Hey. She set her keys down carefully. Her hands were shaking despite her best efforts. I talked to her, Claire said. Mike paused, knife held still. Okay. I told her she's not welcome here anymore, and that I will not tolerate her disrespect toward our marriage or you. He waited. She didn't take it well. I didn't expect she would. Claire swallowed. I should have done this a long time ago. Mike nodded once. Probably. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't forgiving. It was honest. I know this doesn't fix everything, Claire continued, but I need you to know I'm choosing with actions, not explanations. Mike set the knife down and turned to face her fully. I see that, he said. This isn't over yet. But this mattered. Relief bloomed cautiously in her chest. Not reconciliation, but alignment. Upstairs, the ring remained untouched. For the first time, Claire didn't see it as a test. She saw it as an invitation, still open but no longer guaranteed. Chapter 5. The Middle Ground. The first real crack in the stalemate came from the least romantic place imaginable. Mike's office printer. It jammed at exactly 4:47 p.m. on a Friday, producing a noise that sounded suspiciously like it was choking. Mike stood over it, tie loosened, patience thin, watching the error message flash like it had something personal against him. Don't, he warned it quietly, as if that might help. It did not. 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Claire, are you still at work? He stared at the screen longer than necessary before answering. Mike, yeah. Why? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Claire, my car won't start. I'm in the parking garage. Pause. I already called roadside assistance, but they said it'll be at least an hour. Mike leaned back in his chair, eyes closing briefly. This was exactly the kind of situation where habits took over, where doing the obvious right thing didn't require emotional negotiations. Car won't start. You go help. He grabbed his jacket. Mike, text me the level. I'm on my way. The garage smelled like concrete, oil, and impatience. Mike spotted Claire immediately, leaning against her car, arms folded, phone in hand. Relief flashed across her face when she saw him, quickly tempered into something more cautious. Hey, she said. Hey. He popped the hood, moving on autopilot while she watched from a careful distance. It didn't make any warning noises, she explained. It just stopped. Aha, Mike replied, peering into the engine bay. Cars either whisper problems for months or surprise you out of nowhere. This one feels dramatic. Despite herself, Claire huffed a small laugh. He checked the battery connections, frowned, then wiggled one clamp. It shifted more easily than it should have. There, he said. Loose terminal. That's it. Probably. Or it hates you. She smiled at that. A real one. Quickly hidden. When the engine turned over without complaint, Claire exhaled like she hadn't realized she was holding her breath. Thank you, she said. Mike closed the hood and leaned against the car, crossing his arms. You could have called someone else. I could have, she agreed. I wanted to call you. The air between them shifted, not fragile, but alert, like something waking up cautiously. They drove home separately, but when they pulled into the driveway at nearly the same time, something unspoken aligned. Inside, Claire hovered near the kitchen doorway. I was thinking about ordering takeout, unless you already ate. I haven't, Mike said. Okay, Ty. He nodded. Sure. They sat at opposite ends of the table while steam curled up from containers, the mundane familiarity almost disarming. This feels weird, Claire said suddenly. Which part? The part where we're not fighting but we're also not together. Mike considered that. We're in the middle. She nodded. I don't like the middle. I'm not comfortable either, he admitted. But it's honest. She picked at her food. I miss you. The words landed softly without demand. I miss us, he corrected gently. She looked up. What's the difference? I don't want to rush the version of us that pretends we're fine, Mike said. I want the one that actually is. Claire swallowed. I'm trying. I see that. After dinner, the power flickered, and then went out completely. They stared at each other, then burst into laughter before either could stop it. Of course, Claire said. Why wouldn't that happen? Mike found candles. Claire tripped over a chair leg. At one point, they collided, reaching for the same drawer and froze, hands brushing. Sorry overlapped with sorry. The space between them felt smaller now, not resolved but warmer. When the lights came back on, neither commented. The moment didn't need a post-mortem. At the top of the stairs, Claire hesitated. Good night. Night, Mike replied. He paused, then added, Thank you for calling me. Her eyes softened. Thank you for coming. He didn't sleep in the bedroom that night, but when he lay down, the ceiling fan whirring overhead, he realized something important had shifted. The middle ground wasn't empty. It was where rebuilding started, quietly, awkwardly, and exactly where honesty demanded they stand. Chapter 6, Trust, rebuilt sideways. Trust did not come back all at once. It arrived the way spilled water creeps across a countertop, slow, surprising, impossible to stop once it had enough permission to move. Mike noticed it on a Tuesday morning of all times. Claire was standing in the doorway to the guest room holding a sock. One sock, blue with faded gray stripes. One of his. You left this in the dryer, she said. He looked at it, then at her hand. Thanks. She didn't step inside. She didn't linger. She set the sock on the dresser and backed away as if the room itself were still Mike's territory, and she respected that. When the door closed, Mike sat on the bed longer than necessary, staring at the sock like it might explain something. Didn't, but it felt like progress anyway. They fell into an awkward rhythm that required intentional effort from both of them. Claire stopped over-explaining. When she said she'd be late, she didn't add justification. She simply told the truth and followed through. Mike stopped tracking her location updates. He hadn't realized how often he'd been checking until he forced himself to turn them off. On Thursday, she knocked again. "I'm going to dinner with coworkers," she said. "You're invited if you want. No pressure." "No pressure," he repeated. She smiled faintly. "I'm learning." He hesitated, then shook his head. "Not tonight." She nodded. "Okay." No disappointment. No wounded expression. Just acceptance. That night Mike cooked for one. He burned the garlic. "Of course," he muttered, scraping blackened bits into the trash. When he looked up, Claire was leaning against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "You forgot to lower the heat again," she said. "I did not forget," Mike replied. "I made an executive decision." She walked over, picked up the pan, and adjusted the burner without comment. The ease of it startled him. "Still married," she said lightly. Something loosened in his chest. The department picnic happened on Saturday. Mike debated skipping it, but Mark's voice echoed in his head. "Don't isolate. That's where resentment builds." He went alone. When Claire came home later that day, she eyed him curiously. "How was it?" "Uneventful," he said. "No emotional support reptiles." She laughed, a real one, unguarded. "Missed opportunity." He glanced at her. "You didn't ask why I didn't invite you." She shrugged. "I know why." That answer mattered more than she realized. That night, Claire found herself standing in front of the dresser, staring at the ring. She didn't touch it. Instead, she left a note beside it. "I'm not asking you to put this back on yet. I just want you to know I remember what it represents." When Mike saw the note, he sat down hard on the bed. He didn't put the ring on, but he didn't move it either. Sunday morning, the smoke alarm went off while Claire attempted pancakes. Mike bolted upright in the guest room, heart racing, and collided with her in the hallway, both of them reaching for the same extinguisher out of instinct. "You good?" he asked, half laughing. "Define good," she replied, coughing slightly. They stood there, hands still touching the extinguisher handle, eyes meeting. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not pulling away completely." He considered that. "Thank you for not pushing." The alarm stopped screaming. The house settled. They ate slightly underdone pancakes at the table together, no phones, no scripts. Trust wasn't fixed. But it wasn't broken anymore either. It was being rebuilt, not forward, not backward, but sideways, one careful step at a time. Chapter 7. The ring on the counter. The ring moved on a Wednesday. Mike noticed immediately. He hadn't meant to, had even congratulated himself on not checking the dresser every morning. But absence changed perception. The sliver of sunlight that usually caught the gold band now fell flat against bare wood. He stood still, heart ticking faster than the clock in the hall. It wasn't gone. It was on the kitchen counter, centered carefully on a folded piece of paper. Claire wasn't in the room. The house smelled like fresh coffee and toast. Normal. Deceptively normal. Mike approached the counter as if he were handling evidence. The note was written in her neat, looping handwriting. "I'm not asking you to put this back on. I'm asking you to tell me when you're ready to talk about what comes next." He read it twice, then a third time, slower. "She moved it because she wants control," the old instinct whispered. The magnifying glass tilted, searching for hidden barbs, unspoken pressure. Mike closed his eyes and breathed. No, he corrected himself. "She moved it because she's done waiting silently." The guest room door creaked behind him. "Hey," Claire said. He turned. She stood there fully dressed for work, posture straight, hands relaxed at her sides. Her face was calm, determined, but not defensive. It was a look he realized he hadn't seen from her in a long time. "You don't have to answer right now," she added. "I just didn't want that conversation living in the walls." He nodded. "Okay." That evening, they finally sat across from each other. Not to eat, not to fill space, but to talk. Mike rolled the ring between his fingers, feeling its familiar weight. "You didn't nag," he said slowly. "You didn't push." Claire shrugged slightly. That felt like the wrong move. "What changed?" She took a breath. "I realized I was afraid of choosing you out loud. Afraid that meant losing someone else, or some version of myself. And now I see that not choosing was the choice." Silence settled between them. Not tense, not fragile. "Honest. I don't want to lose you," Claire said. "But I won't beg you to stay in a marriage where you feel like you're guarding the door alone." Mike looked at the ring, set it on the counter again. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I'm scared that if I put it back on too early, I'll teach myself to ignore that voice again." She nodded. "That's fair." He studied her face, really studied it, and saw no deflection there. No smoothing, just resolve. "I don't want to start over," Mike said. "I want to continue, but differently." Claire smiled softly. Me too. They didn't touch the ring that night. But when they turned out the lights and went upstairs, Mike paused outside the guest room, then kept walking. He didn't close the bedroom door behind him. Outside, the house settled into sleep, something uncoiling gently in the quiet. The ring stayed on the counter, for now, and for the first time, neither of them was afraid of what it meant to leave it there. Chapter 8. Choosing each other again. The ring stayed on the counter for 4 days. Mike knew exactly how long because he noticed everything, even when he pretended not to. The sunlight shifted across it differently depending on the time of day. In the morning, it caught the edge like a quiet accusation. In the evening, it dulled, almost shy. During those 4 days, life continued carefully, deliberately. They shared coffee in the mornings, standing instead of sitting, like neither wanted comfort to turn into assumption. They texted during the day, but only about real things. Meeting ran long. Don't wait for dinner. Found that charger you thought we lost. At night, they brushed their teeth side by side, catching each other's eyes in the mirror with small, private smiles that didn't demand anything more. On the 5th evening, Mike came home carrying a grocery bag and a decision he'd been circling for weeks. Claire smelled garlic before she heard him. She leaned against the kitchen doorway, watching as he unpacked with familiar efficiency, sorting, organizing, lining things up by use instead of category. You're cooking, she said. I am, Mike replied. Thought it would be a good night for it. She hesitated. For what? He finally looked at her. Talking. Her pulse jumped, but she nodded. Okay. They ate at the table. No TV. No background noise. Just the quiet clink of utensils and the slow ease of shared space. When the plates were cleared, Mike stood, walked to the counter, and picked up the ring. Claire's breath caught. I'm not putting it back on yet, he said, anticipating the look on her face. But I need to say some things out loud. She sat straighter. I'm listening. I don't want a marriage where I'm the only one paying attention, Mike began. I don't want to be the boundary, the reminder, the person who has to feel danger before it's obvious. She nodded, eyes steady. You shouldn't have to be. I know you didn't cheat, he continued. But trust isn't only about fidelity. It's about loyalty when the temptation is subtle. Claire swallowed. I didn't see it that way before. I do now, Mike said. And I can't unsee it. He set the ring down again between them this time. This is the part where I usually protect myself by pulling back permanently, he admitted. But I don't want that life. I want this one. With you. Just not at the cost of my peace. Claire reached out but stopped short, hands resting near the ring instead. I'm not asking you to forget, she said. I'm asking you to let me be someone you don't need to watch anymore. He studied her carefully. The stillness, the absence of defensiveness, the quiet certainty. You cut her out completely, he said. Yes. You didn't tell me until it was done. Yes. You didn't ask for credit. No. His mouth curved slightly. That part was new. She smiled faintly. Uncomfortable, but new felt necessary. Mike picked up the ring again, rolling it once between his fingers. I don't want to go backwards, he said, but I am willing to move forward. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. Together. He met her eyes. Intentionally. He slid the ring back onto his finger. Not ceremoniously, not dramatically. Just firmly. Correctly. Where it belonged because the choice had been made, not demanded. Claire didn't cry. She laughed softly instead. A breath of disbelief and relief tangled together. I promise, she said. No smoothing. No avoiding. No choosing comfort over commitment. Mike stood and pulled her into him. Not urgent, not desperate. Steady. They held each other in the quiet kitchen, the house finally sounding right again. Trust wasn't a switch. It was a practice. And for the first time since the line had been crossed, both of them were choosing to stand on the same side of it. Epilogue. Still wearing it. 6 months later. The ring was no longer something Mike noticed, which, paradoxically, was how he knew everything was right. It had settled back into its proper role. Not a symbol he weighed or measured. Not a reminder he checked for reassurance, but an extension of his hand. Present. Counted for. Unremarkable in the best possible way. On a warm Saturday morning, Mike stood in the kitchen making coffee while Claire sat at the table, reading over a grocery list with an intensity that suggested negotiations were imminent. We do not need 3 kinds of mustard, he said mildly. We absolutely do, Claire replied without looking up. One is for sandwiches, one is for sauces, and one is for when we feel fancy. Mike poured water into the kettle, aligning it with the burner out of habit. You have assigned emotional states to condiments. And, she smiled over the top of the paper. You alphabetize your spices and group them by cuisine. That's called organization. She leaned back in her chair. That's called foresight bordering on prophecy. He snorted before he could stop himself. They'd learned how to argue differently. Less deflection. Fewer assumptions. When something bothered them, they said it. Sometimes poorly, sometimes awkwardly, but always aloud. Claire no longer smoothed conflict away like crumbs on a counter. Mike no longer treated vigilance as the same thing as care. On the fridge, held up by a magnet shaped like an oddly threatening flamingo, hung a simple index card. House rules, revised. Say it when it matters. No third-party commentary. We protect us. They'd written it together one evening after a conversation that ended in laughter instead of distance. Claire finished her list and stood, stretching. After groceries? Do you want to grab lunch? Mike glanced at the clock. We could. Or we could go to the matinee and eat popcorn for lunch like irresponsible adults. She considered this seriously. You make a compelling argument. He set 2 mugs on the table and leaned down to kiss her. Unrushed, familiar, warm. As they pulled back, Claire rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not leaving when it would have been easier. Mike looked at her, really looked at her. The steadiness, the self-possession she'd grown into, the way she met his eyes without flinching now. Thank you, he replied. For choosing loudly. Later, as they left the house together, Mike locked the door and slipped the keys into his pocket. The sun caught his hand at just the right angle, the ring glinting briefly before disappearing into normalcy again. Still wearing it. Not because he was afraid to take it off, but because this time it was a choice they kept making every day on the same side of the line.